artist. Today we're going to be starting a winter painting with watercolors. We're going to use a couple different techniques to keep the paper white. We're going to be painting birch trees, we'll have a moon in our picture, and lots of snow. So we need to figure out ways to keep the paper white when we're using watercolors. So this is what you're going to need to make your birch tree winter watercolor painting. You're going to need a pencil. This is for a couple different things. You're going to need a Sharpie, some watercolors. I happen to be using liquid watercolors. You will need a white oil pastel and some tape. Now I'm using blue painter's tape because it's a little less sticky than regular masking. What we're going to do with watercolors, traditionally watercolors don't come in white. And so if you want something to stay white in your picture, you have to keep the paint off. We're going to do that in a couple different ways. We're going to do that by, first of all, just not painting. For example, in the snow, we're not going to paint. We're going to use oil pastel for the moon so that we can keep the moon white or mostly white. And then we're going to use tape to keep the paper white where the birch trees are going to be. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to have kind of a long piece of tape. And by the way, if your paper is vertical, that will work too. Here's how you tear the tape. You put your fingers really close together and then take one hand and pull backwards. Then you're going to put, you want to make at least three trees. If you want to do 5, you can, but I like to do 3. Now they don't have to be all equally spaced out perfect, but you do want to have the top part of your tree go off the paper and have the bottom be a little bit short. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to make 3 trees, and they don't have to be equally spaced. One might be a little shorter. Maybe I'll put this one a little closer to this tree. It's going off the top and then off the bottom. One more tree. Tear it. And then I think I'm going to put this one way over here, just so it's not exactly the same distance apart. Make sure those trees are nice and vertical. You don't want any trees tipping over or leaning. All right, the next thing you're going to do, make sure you don't have any bubbles. Don't push super hard because then it gets too stuck to your paper and will tear later on. All right, so then the next thing you're going to do is you are going to put a black line on the sides of your tree using the Sharpie. And we're using a Sharpie instead of a water-based marker because we are going to paint over this. And you don't want that color to mix with your sky colors. So I'm just going to go down each side. You can kind of feel the edge of that tape. Oh, and if you get a little off, just go back and get on track. Go slow so you don't leave any gaps. Okay, now I've done all 3. I'm going to close my marker. Next thing I'm going to do is make the moon. You can put the moon anywhere at the top of your paper. I think it's easier if it doesn't go behind one of your trees. So choose a place, and if you want to draw it lightly with your pencil first, it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. And I am going to go ahead and draw around the circle first, and then I'm going to color it in. Now, if you're having a hard time telling if you've colored the whole thing in, try moving your paper around so that you can see it from different angles, and you can usually make sure that way you've got everything. I like to make sure I get it really colored in, so I go over it a few times, but I'm being very careful not to go outside of that pencil mark. All right, if you've got any crumbs, just shake it off. It's okay, by the way, if your tape is sticking to the scrap paper. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the horizon line. That is the line where the sky meets the ground, in this case, the snow. So you can make it perfectly straight if you want. You can also have a curve like hills, but make sure it is well above the bottom of your trees. So it goes behind, and it doesn't have to be super big, maybe something like that. If you do add a curve, make sure you're not making it too curvy, because that's not really how this picture would look. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is just paint. There's 2 things we're gonna paint, the sky and then the shadows, okay, going from the bottom of the tree. So I usually do the sky first because it's the biggest area. And since this is kind of a nighttime picture, one of your colors needs to be probably a nice dark blue. But before I add paint, I'm going to quickly go over this with water. Now, the one thing you have to know about this technique with the tape is that you cannot over soak your paper. You want it to be wet, go right over the moon too, by the way. You want it to be wet, but you don't want it to be super puddly, just damp. All right, that's wet. Now I'm gonna take my blue and I'm gonna start at the top. And the nice thing is if your paper's still wet, that paint kind of blends with the water and smears. Paint right over your moon, you don't have to worry. Now, this is in a very big area. Notice how long my paintbrush strokes are going so that I can fill that in quickly. We don't want this paint to dry. I'm gonna wash off my brush and go into the magenta over here. I'm gonna paint that on the bottom. Just go right along that pencil line, one long smooth move. And if you get a little bit over it, don't stress out about that. If you have two colors like magenta and blue here that blend well together, you can let them mix a little. Be careful if you're using colors that don't blend well together. Oops, I missed this corner. I'm going to go back and get it. Now, the thing is, you don't want this to have any puddles, so I'm going to go back over this real quick, not pushing hard, just being real gentle, and I'm wiping away any big puddles. Before this has a chance to dry, if you'd like to use some salt to kind of create the illusion or that starry effect, you can sprinkle a little on here, but you don't need much. Just a little will do. And as this dries, that salt will have an effect on the watercolor that's really kind of cool. If you've got watercolor sticking to your moon right now, don't worry about that. We can fix that next time. Now, the last thing we have to do while this is drying up here is create the shadows coming from the moon and being cast from the trees onto the snow. Now, the snow usually has kind of bluish shadows. So I'm going to take my watercolor tray here and I'm going to make a little puddle of water, and I'm going to take some blue and I'm going to dab that in. I don't want this to be super dark. Shadows should not be super dark on here. So what I'm going to do, I know this about light. Light travels in straight lines. That means the shadow, when it goes from the moon and is on the snow, it's like a line that goes straight from the bottom of the tree. Don't start way up here at the moon and draw a whole line going like that. What you want to do is use your finger and draw a line so you can kind of see the direction that the shadow will go. So then you just paint from the bottom of the tree, a straight shadow, because our trees are really straight. Now, I could go this way, but over here, my light source, my moon, the light is coming from this way. So my shadows will change direction over here and they will go this way. And one more time from the bottom of this tree. Ooh, it's going to be really close to that other one. And now this is done. And we are just going to put this on the drying rack with the tape and the scrap paper. You're just going to take that and put that safely on the drying rack. Now, I would love for you to be able to take the tape off next week when you come to art. The only problem is if we let this tape stick on here for an entire week, it is going to get stuck on here and then it's going to really leave your paper damaged. It's going to tear it. So what I have here, I will be doing is I will be taking, once your paper is dry enough, I will just take the tape off for you. So I thought I'd show you what that does, just so you can see the effect. I will come by when your paper is dry enough, and I'm just gonna kind of peel that off, get it started. And, oh, it's giving me a little trouble here. And what I will do is I'm gonna, as carefully as possible, I'm gonna peel that tape off. Now you can see I've got a little tear for my paper, but a little tear is not a big deal, as long as we don't have holes in our paper. Kind of actually creates a nice little texture if you have a little tear. Ooh, that one's tearing really nicely. Now you might find next week when you come that you get a little, this is only a little bit, if you painted too much on your sky, that there will be leaking going on. So watch out for over painting your sky or adding too much water. That happens, you'll get watercolor that soaks up underneath there, so be careful. So that gives you an idea of what it will look like when you see yours next time when you come to art. Hopefully I've brushed off some of the salt for you too. And that's all you have to know for part 1 today. I hope you've had fun doing this, learning 3 different ways to keep your paper white with watercolors. 1, just don't paint it. 2, mask it. or 3, put something with wax or oil on top to keep the paint from sticking. So next time we're going to be adding texture to the trees, but don't worry about that today. So until next time, stay creative. Goodbye.